my name is Janice B Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B Gordon, a customer growth expert, awarded RevTech strategist of 2024. In today's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest talks about the state of sales and GTM, and really was very reflective about what are the challenges that we're going through, and really the conversation continued with some of the strategies that we can use to negotiate many of these challenges. One of which we talked about was hiring. Some of the hiring practices that we've used before and how we can get a broader range of people. She gave lots of examples of how she has negotiated her career and been committed to having a diverse workforce. My next guest is a global chief evangelist at HireQuotient, a purpose-driven AI company that simplifies recruiting by finding exceptional and diverse talent. As a global recognized thought leader, keynote speaker, and podcast host, author, and advisor, she is passionate about the future of buying and selling, the role product and commercial innovation plays in driving successful revenue outcome. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Mary Shea.
Thank you so much for having me, Janice. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm excited to banter with you on behalf of your listeners.
Yeah, well, this is in my 5th year, you know, Mary, 5th year of podcast, and I can't believe, knowing you for so long, this is the first time I've got you on. But I know that we've had a live series as well. So when I get you, I really kind of am maxing it out with you. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I know that you have had such an interesting, unique professional career, and I'd really like you to kind of like reflect back on some of the highlights in your career. You know, like everything you do is to take you on to the next stage. So kind of picking up on some of those highlights. What would they be to bring you where you are now?
Yeah, well, no surprise, you're starting with a very deep and thoughtful question. So thank you for that, Janice. And absolutely, my career has been very nonlinear, as you know, since we're quite friendly, and others can know from seeing it on LinkedIn and what I've done. And, you know, very briefly, I started out as a professional musician, a classical musician, and did that profession globally for about 15 years. And you know, as I was coming to the end of that, and I also got a PhD in musicology and ethnomusicology, I found out that I just had a love for business, and in particular sales. And I found out by selling cars in my off summer when I wasn't a professor, teaching music history and a range of different things. And so that's what brought me into technology in the business world. Kind of a long story, probably better told over a cup of coffee or a tea. But you know, I guess the biggest lessons that I can share with your audience is, you know, take calculated risks, and that's where I've seen the biggest upside in my career. So after being, you know, a PhD in musicology and a professional musician, I had an opportunity to join Forrester as an entry-level sales rep. I was a SDR, Janice, and I'll tell your listeners, I started at 35 years old. And so it was a very humbling experience. Like, that is not an easy job. But, you know, I found some wonderful people to work with, people who were coaches and mentors and who encouraged me. And I started at Forrester in sales at the right time, at the right place. So, you know, part of it is, don't be afraid to take a big, audacious, calculated risk. The other part is, you know, you can map out everything and plan out everything, but luck is a factor, right? And I just happened to start Forrester in 1996, just when the internet was on the cusp of being understood around how companies would use it to engage with consumers in the B2C world, as well as business partners in the B2B world. And Forrester helped companies sort that out and figure it out. And I was lucky enough to join 6 months before we had an IPO, and that was my first successful exit. So, I think it's don't discount luck. Take those calculated risks at the right moment in time. Another risk I took was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I went back to Forrester as a Forrester analyst. I was on the product side instead of the sales side. And I've been doing the job for 7 years or so, and I loved it. It's the best possible job you could have. But some things had to change internally around the product strategy. We had made an acquisition, and the strategic vision was just not aligned with me and what I wanted to do, even though I deeply love the company. And I decided, let's, see what I can go do. Let's see what's out there. And so I reached out to CEOs of 5 non-competitive companies that were in my portfolio as an analyst and said, would you consider hiring me as an evangelist? And that would be something like, I'm your own analyst, but I go out and educate the market and conduct research and do thought leadership and do sales support for your folks. And, would you hire me? And Anna Baird, who was at Outreach at the time, said yes, and I had a couple other yeses as well. And I was able to close to triple my income. And so that wasn't the primary driver, but the message to your listeners is, if you don't like the channel, change it, right? Someone special said that to me once, and we do have the power to make some of these changes. And so those were two, I think, really critical spots in my career. And certainly there's been others that put me on a positive trajectory.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've seen lots of state of sales reports. They come out every year. So kind of still in the reflective mood where you are now. What's your feeling about the state we're in, GTM, the state of sales?
Yes. Another really good question, because I've been thinking about that a lot and been having that conversation in different one-to-ones that I have. My feeling on the state of sales is that we are in a very big transitional moment. When I go back to 2015, when I was at Forrester as an analyst, a futurist, I put a stake in the ground and said, the world of buying and selling is changing. That means the world of selling is going to change. And in the future, sellers are going to be augmented by technology. And I didn't have a sense of generative AI at that time. I was just thinking really automation and some of the basic ways we were using AI back then. And I thought and predicted that sellers would partner with and be very tightly tied into technology. There would be way less sellers in the future because they would be so much more effective and efficient. And there'd be something like the agile, efficient, technology-enabled sales force. And, I think we've been heading towards that since 2015. And then naturally, COVID accelerated everything, but mostly accelerated not only in B2B sales, but also in other industries, trends that were already percolating under the surface. So I think of COVID as, as a real accelerant for some of these big macro trends. And then naturally, very difficult for many of us who have experienced loss and have been ill, obviously. But on the innovation side, it was a massive accelerant, both in, seeing the technology continue to emerge and mature, but also go to market innovation. And so now here we are. We've got CEOs at late stage startups who I know really well, I'm not going to name names, who are saying everybody's got to come back to the office, or, you got to be back to the office 3 days a week. We have FinServ CEOs pounding the desk and saying, you won't work here unless you're in the office. And we've got multi-generational Salesforce saying, well, I need to go take care of my mom in the middle day. I don't want to spend $50 extra a day commuting. That's the general cost in America, Janice, to go into the office. It's another $50 a day, whether that's gas, parking, dry cleaning, my Starbucks, my lunch. I need to fuel constantly. So, so we have this multi-generational sales force who's saying, hey, wait a minute, I value my personal freedoms. I don't necessarily need to go in the office to do 8 Zoom calls a day. Let's think about this. And then we have mature sales technologies that are supporting sellers. and lots of disruption that's happening underneath the surface, because now with generative AI, honestly, everyone can build a cadence tool and spin it up really quickly. So, do I need to pay the outreaches and sales lofts of the world all this money, or should I just work with a smaller startup or spin it up myself? And now we also have sales leaders who are being told, you got to grow and you need to do it with less. You need to be more efficient. And I know, coming from a growth at all cost environment that I came from at some of the unicorns I've worked with, to now this efficient, predictable growth, it's a huge transition for some leaders who have come up through the organization who've never really had to grow their business, particularly in SaaS, traditional business, of course, right? And these leaders are struggling because instead of being able to hire 3 salespeople to hit $1 million in quota, one who's going to make it, one who's going to push that person to make it, and one you're going to fire, your CFO is like, you need to get this hire right because we're only funding this. And I think we're also moving away from this mindset of, 20% of your top reps are going to make 80% of your revenue, to, hey, guess what? You need to make 100% of your revenue with 80% of your reps. Now, productivity and consistency across the whole team is becoming the name of the game. So, look, I mean, I think all of this is like a mashup, a mosh pit of innovation, change, challenge, transition. And I expect we'll probably be in this transitional mode for like about 3 years. That's my prediction.
Yeah. And does this excite you or fill you with dread?
Oh, well, of course, I'm a glasses half full kind of gal, particularly on the innovation side. But look, my heart goes out to people who are on the beach. We know in our community, in our network, lots of senior, extraordinarily talented professionals are on the beach right now. Some of those lean more towards female and underrepresented folks, which you and I know get deeply affected by some of these changes. I talk to no less than 3 to 4 former colleagues on a weekly basis who are phenomenal professionals on the beach looking for their next gig. So some of the pain as we cut through this innovation kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because it's hard. But at the same time, if you can be humble, go to ground, and skill yourself up like nobody's business. And honestly, I'm doing that. I'm not necessarily in the world's most perfect situation professionally either, but I'm trying to learn, go to ground, get new skills, and align myself professionally with the most innovative companies that I can possibly find out there. And I'm thrilled to be part of HireQuotient right now, and helping them scale up in America as an evangelist. But it's a mixed bag, right? Because there's pain for some professionals who are trying to navigate this change, and that yet the ones who do, oh my gosh, there's going to be no limit. But I think it's going to be a mosh pit of uncomfortableness for the next 3 years for many of us, if that's actually a word. Not sure it is.
We'll take it. We'll take it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting that the world is not a fair place, and as we get older, you realize how unfair it is. And as much as we kind of like might shout and point things out, it's still the imbalances are really brutal. But it's interesting that there are always opportunities when there is challenge and change, and it's about embracing those opportunities. And sometimes it's about learning a different mindset, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm working with HireQuotient right now, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but the technology is just absolutely elegant, and it solves a really serious business problem. And it allows recruiters to augment their workflows with tech and spend their time on the most important activities. But as I learn the technology, I'm like starting at the baseline again, right? I'm, building sequences. I'm reaching out to people in my network. And having come off of a CEO job, it's like, wow, okay, this is a bit humbling, but at the same time, I'm learning so much. And so if you can find a way to maintain, positivity in this flux of change, which is not always good for every family or every professional, and learn, um, and align yourself with great people, you're going to come out of this on the other side better and stronger.
Yeah, yeah. So we are going to get into HireQuotient, but I first wanted to ask you, with all your experience as a sales leader and CEO, you've recruited a lot of people, and particularly looking at sales. What are the particular challenges that you have experienced? What's particular to sales recruitment?
Well, I think first and foremost, and this is no surprise because you and I've done many panels on this topic, is you get 100 male applicants, right? And thankfully, we're seeing some of that change now with all of the wonderful work that you're doing with the community over in EMEA, and things that Lori Richardson does, and Hang Black, and others, Alexine Moudwar, and now we've got Wednesday's women out there with Leslie Greenwood. So, there's lots of communities that are out there to support women B2B sellers and women who are scaling up their roles and responsibilities up the value chain as in the sales organization. So that is so wonderful. But I would say, as a former CRO and also hiring manager as a CEO, making sure that I could get a cadre of diverse candidates for the finals is difficult and challenging, particularly in some roles, namely sales, where you still only have about a third of B2B sellers identify as women. And even I was working with another company, helping them find a very, very senior principal database architect. And that person needed to have 10 plus years of experience and work at a database company. And as you go down in that needle in the haystack gets deeper and deeper, the haystack gets bigger, the needle gets smaller, you start to see, a bunch of homogeneous candidates. And so we were able to run our technology and dig a little deeper and bring at least one female candidate out of 6 or 7 to that role. And so I think, getting to diverse, highly qualified candidates with very specific talent is challenging. That would be, I think, my biggest challenge as a hiring leader. I'd
Right.
be interested in
Yeah.
your thoughts too. I mean, you're out
Well,
there.
yeah, we're going to get into this because
Okay.
really, yeah. So I know you hadn't, prior to joining HireQuotient, I know you hadn't experienced them as well. So tell me about that. What did it do for you as a client of theirs?
Yeah, so I was in a very unique situation at this revenue enablement company that I was co-CEO of, and I was a board member before that time, and I was brought in to raise funds very quickly. It's no surprise that just about every company in that space in SaaS had been struggling a year ago, and there are some real challenges that needed to be addressed very quickly. And we also needed to go through several reductions in force to get the company to a place where um, it could turn on a dime to be break even if need be, once after we got the funding. And then simultaneously, I needed to raise the skill level of talent in a couple of, probably 10 to 15 really key positions. So it was a little bit of cacophony in the sense that, you're going through these reductions in force, and at the same time, you're investing in some other candidates. And we're seeing this with big tech right now as they're redeploying both financial capital and headcount capital into everything Gen AI. In this case, it was more of, I needed a really crackerjack demand gen person. I needed a salesperson based in EMEA that didn't live in the UK. All my contacts are in the UK. They needed to speak 3 languages, of which German was one. Not my favorite language. I barely got my PhD because I could hardly get through that language. It's so hard. This person needed to have worked or know SAP really well and worked at a revenue enablement company. How the hell are you going to find that person? And then simultaneously, I had to find a chief customer officer. Now I had 2 separate problems. One, there was no way, unless I hired an external search firm, I was going to find that diamond in the rough sitting in Belgium. There's just no way. And HireQuotient was able to find that candidate in 2 weeks and multiple candidates, and we made a hire faster than I ever would have thought. On the chief customer officer search, we had 1,000 applicants. So I had a different problem there. And then I had 2 applicants that came from my personal network, one from the board and someone I had worked with previously. And I fully assumed I was going to hire those 2. But because of my platform and my position in the market and my personal beliefs, I was not going to simply hire, the easy choice. I wanted to bring a very diverse set of candidates to the finals. And so HireQuotient went through those 1,000 candidates and gave me the top 1%. I had a final group of 4. I would have been happy to hire any one of the 4. 2 folks of color, 2 men, 2 women, and some intersectionality there. And there may be more diversity, but we didn't peel back the onion, beyond that, what was visible and what we folks had shared on their LinkedIn and stuff. And I ended up hiring the candidate that HireQuotient surfaced, much to my shock and dismay, that candidate actually, which I never would have found them, was better suited for the role. And I would have just in the past probably just hired someone from my network, like many CXOs do, right? And
Yeah.
the problem from doing that is
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And
so
I thought that was a great demonstration of HireQuotient and what they can do for you. And it's really finding that diamond in the rough, because one of the problems of sourcing through LinkedIn is that there's inaccuracy, profiles complete.
Yes.
And recruiters, we're paying all this money to recruiters, and a lot of their resources are plowed into an imperfect platform. And it seems to be, especially in sales, is that we're just filtering the same thing, going round and round and round again.
Yes.
So this is what I love about the platform.
Yeah, and I really, really love your comments there, because it's so true. Like, if we don't break this cycle, we're going to continue to do the same things. And so this is a case, sometimes when you think of AI and hiring, you can think about, I had my resume built by a bot and the bot's going to analyze my resume and I'm going to get up here and I'm going to get up there. But it's not that simplistic, right? So there can be bias, but what HireQuotient does is allow the recruiter and the business leader to press through and overcome some of the natural biases that exist. And you've accurately pointed out that LinkedIn does not have the most accurate information. People are very inconsistent around how they update their profiles. And if I'm looking for a database architect that has Java, C++, a range of other skills, maybe some wonderful candidate just simply didn't put that on LinkedIn. And so what we do at HireQuotient, what the software does is that we have a large ecosystem of partnerships with data providers, social media platforms, and we go to a range of sources, and then we cross-check those sources with Crunchbase and other types of databases. For example, like in my case, I wanted to hire someone who had done a scale up to 100 million and overseen multiple SaaS products and been through an M&A. Well, maybe someone's not going to put that on their LinkedIn, but if we go to Crunchbase and circumvent, candidates that we like with more and deeper detail, we can get better candidates, and we can bring back those candidates that maybe don't have the best LinkedIn profile and not miss them. And I just did that for a customer this morning, where I found a female candidate who didn't have the specifics on LinkedIn, and they never would have gone after her. And we were able to surface her up. And so I'm very proud of what this software is able to help companies do.
I certainly love it in that it can broaden the reach to actually find the cream of the crop. However,
I love a healthy skeptic. Bring it on, babe. Bring it on.
Okay, so and I'm particularly talking about sales, because I know HireQuotient, it's across the board, all industries. So we know that resumes, interviews have a predictive effectiveness of 20%. So we've got this broad source of people. We've in the resource that I use, it's recommended, not recommended, worthy of consideration. In your, easy source tool, so you've got a great person, but
Yeah.
now we put them into an interview situation. We haven't actually checked the interviewer, the interview panel. I know there's training, and I know that there are resources. However, there isn't really, we can then apply the bias there, and the predictive effectiveness of that bit, it's another filter that you don't necessarily have control over.
Yeah, so that is true. I think, what we can do as a software provider and a business partner for our recruiters is really, continue to help educate them, give them the best technology at their disposal so that they can go to their hiring managers with a diverse set of very professional profiles that have, all of the stars that they want. One thing we do is that we also allow the recruiter to actually, re-star a candidate based on when they talk to them. If that candidate maybe doesn't have one skill, instead of discounting them, we maybe put them at a 4-star and give them a chance, to really show what they can do. I think what you're really referring to is just more internal education for people on the interview loops and hiring managers around, um, like if you want a diverse team, and all the research shows that diverse teams outperform those that are not, um, you've got to have some diverse folks on your interview loops. This is I think so many people have said, or so many women mentors that have inspired me, if you can see it, you can be it. And the converse is true. If you can't see it, you can't be it. So, the onus is on companies to make sure they've got diversity at the board level, in the C-suite, and on your interview loops. And I don't know if I directly answered your question, but hopefully that gives you just some just a vision into how I think about this. Or
Yeah, I think it's about them being aware that they can bring in the bias. You've worked so hard to
right,
take it all out, but
right.
actually at this point, and so there should be some standards going forward. That this is sales specific, verified and predictive data that we use to actually find that cream in the crop in
Yeah.
sales. And what we don't want to do is we don't want the interview process to kind of kill all the great work that
So
we've done.
that's a really great point. And so that, goes a little bit beyond the scope of what
Yeah.
HireQuotient does, but there's a wonderful company out there called Exec Online, and it does leadership training for members of the leadership team. And, some of that is around, your basic compliance stuff, and others around DE&I. I know we're not supposed to say those letters anymore, but I'm going to say it. Others around, understanding your own biases. So that's where I think, it's really important for companies to invest in that type of training, even in an environment of efficiency.
Yeah, and as you say, looking internally at your board, what is the makeup of your board, your senior management team, those on the panel at recruitment? Because companies say that they want a diverse team, but actually the diverse team is less attracted to them if it's not reflective in senior management, and it's recognizing that and doing something about it. So it's kind of working internally in the organization and as well. So I really do find this absolutely fascinating, and love the EC source platform for removing a lot of the bias. As I say, I have a different tool that is sales specific and predictive. And what happens is the assessment that is conducted is turned over on recruitment to the onboarding platform that gives the managers the coaching points for that individual, so
Oh,
that we can
wow.
coach them to be at the the elite top performing potential. We're making the
Right.
potential into actual by having that detailed information on that individual. So not only they are recommended and they're recruited, but we need to make sure that the onboarding of that
Right.
individual and the support the individual has ensures that they reach their full potential.
I think that's so wonderful. And I would love to, we should just do exchange demos because I'd love to learn a little bit more about your tool because it
Mm,
sounds like there's a lot of synergy, us on the front end and you a little
yeah.
bit on sort of the mid to the latter end to ensure folks really understand their own personal biases because let's be frank, we all have them, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I know that it's a dirty word, but I can't, can't leave. I don't know why it's become a dirty word, but we know it's out there. Your commitment to seeing underrepresented professionals in the top tiers of organizations. Like, we keep talking about this. We're constantly, behind the scenes, we're always
Yep.
talking about it. If there was a CEO listening here, what is the one thing, if there is ever a one thing, what is the one thing you would advise them to do to really start to make a difference in terms of having a balanced view in their senior leadership?
Yes, yes. So it's interesting regarding that word we're not supposed to say or that acronym. I actually saw someone post on LinkedIn yesterday, and I have to grab it because he said that no matter what, he was still going to talk about it. And so, so there's some people out there who are carrying the torch forward. But look, the world has its cycles, right? There's cycles of populism. There's cycles of other types of things. There's monetary cycles, and the more I read, the more I see other points of view. I see that many things are on these types of cycles, and we're at a place now where there's some polarity, at least in America, and social views and mores. And so I think rightfully so, CEOs have kind of backed off of being so front forward in some ways. But the most important thing is it just comes down to the basics, Janice, right? Like if your company, if your board, if your executive team doesn't look like the world around you or doesn't have the experiences of the world around you and your customer base, then what's the point, right? I don't want to be a customer and go to a big event that you're holding and or someone's holding, right? And I'm the only person who's like me there. It's like I'm paying these folks all this money. I want to see someone in my role, in my position with my life experiences on the stage every once in a while. Now, that may be difficult because there's a lot going on with me, but you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and I'll open up a little bit more here than I typically do on podcasts. And I don't know because it's you, but, so I went to this event in Ojai, California, and it was put on by Yardstick. And it was really, it was for CEOs and primarily CEOs who, are underrepresented folks. And I'd never been to an event like that before in my life. And the theme for the event was AI and understanding how quickly AI was maturing and what the impact was going to be, and on thinking about responsible AI. And I went to this event, and it was just amazing. It was probably about 50 people, and it was the first time I'd ever been in a room where the color of my skin was a minority, um, significant minority.
Wow.
And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, this is so great. I've never had this experience. Um, I'm going to have so much to tell everybody about. I'm going to learn a lot. And the topic was right up my alley. So we had all the speakers, and it was kind of interesting. I kept raising my hand and no one called on me. And I kept raising my hand. I'm like, well, shit, I used to be an analyst. I'm a CEO. Like, why isn't anyone calling on me? And I was like, a day and a half into it, I was like, okay, I get it. There's some other people that don't get called on first, second, and third who are here. And you know what? I can wait. It's okay. Um, and then a little bit into it, the CEO had noticed that I kept raising my hand and went to someone and was like, please recognize this person. And she was a person of color, and I was like, wow, I was really grateful for that person because they gave me my moment to share my feelings. And then I was really grateful to be in an event where I wasn't first called.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen that often for people that, have my experience and color my skin. And I was like, that was a learning moment for me. And I want more of those. So I don't know, this is a little bit circuitous, but
Do
hopefully
you know
that
what?
resonates.
When you were saying that, I was thinking, because obviously,
You knew where I was going.
I know where you're going, and but I was really thinking that your attitude was that this was a humbling event, that it was a learning event, whereas many other attitudes to that event might be, how dare they?
I know, yeah. I was like,
do they not know who I am? And,
I know. I'm like,
know,
haven't they read my bio? I mean, I'm gonna have like interesting things to say here.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it right away. Like I was a little bit slower, and then I got it. And I was like, okay, it's okay. It's okay. I've had my turn. If my turn comes, it's okay. If it doesn't, I'm just gonna soak up and learn from everybody else in the room. And it was good for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because many of us, some people have entitlement. And I said, like, I do too, right? Even though this is such an important platform for me. And I was like, wow, you're pretty entitled, Mary. Like, let's take a breath.
And I think what's important about sharing this, Mary, is because that we talk about entitlement, but we don't know what it feels like. Because if you've always had it, you don't know what it feels like. And you're doing this kind of like thinking leapfrogs, and all of this stuff is going on in your head. Is it me? All of that. And you need to know what it feels like.
I love that, because it was so evocative. And I was just like, and I was kind of at first upset with myself that I didn't, get the situation sooner. And then I was like, no, this is a learning moment. Good for you. And I hadn't actually shared that learning moment with anyone besides my spouse. So, so it was a learning moment for me, and hopefully any of your listeners who have some entitlements, maybe they'll see it faster than I did. And for me, that's a win.
The important thing is seeing it and feeling it and understanding it and being okay with it. There are a lot of we're talking about sales and the whole revenue environment, and we talked about how challenging it is to get a diverse workforce in sales, and really understanding what it's like for that other person on the other side of the table. We talk a lot about understanding our customers, but what about the other people in the team? How do they feel? What is it like for them? And that's why I think this is such a teachable moment to think, okay, I haven't had that feeling. I need to put myself in a position where I understand what it feels like.
Yeah. And I did. I understood really, really deeply, Janice. And, that will be with me forever, that feeling.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, Mary, I know we're coming on to the.
We went over. Do we go? I'm sure we went over time.
This is fantastic. I absolutely love it. Yeah, Mary, thank you. Thank you. I've absolutely loved our conversation. Thank you so much for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast. And everyone should also go to the lives that I've done with Mary. There's lots of great information that we've discussed on that. So it's on the events tab in LinkedIn, the lives. There's so much more. If you want more, go and see the lives discussions that we had. Thank you.
Wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. Please, everyone, connect with Mary on LinkedIn. Tell her that you heard her on these sessions, and thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.